Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Research Sofa. I'm here today with Dr. Mia Campbell, who's a health psychology researcher, and she's going to tell us a little bit about her work in the area of altered eating in people with severe mental health. So over to you, Mia. Just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's really exciting to talk about this. It's an area of research that I have an awful lot of sort of passion for and genuine enthusiasm and sort of full of beans about it, because it's about something that is a really important part of our daily activities in life in general, and it sort of gets overlooked. It's about eating. It's about food and eating, and when it comes to food and eating and any patient group or even sort of public health research, we always look to address things in terms of nutrition and weight management, obesity, etc., healthy living, healthy food choices, and the things that get left behind are things like pleasure and joy. Food is the source, one of the biggest sources of joy in life, and for me, one of the very, very few things that sort of are a source of joy. And so when it comes to women with severe mental illness, it's a particularly important thing because it relates to psychological well-being, it relates to quality of life, and the tools that we use to understand people's relationships with food, and the way that they eat and the way that they sort of experience pleasure and joy of food are actually particularly suitable for complex cases. And when it comes to women with severe mental illness, which that's the kind of the patient group that we're interested in, there's an awful lot of complexity there. We know from previous literature, it's surprising how much we know, and we've never sort of thought of relating it to food and eating. But we have impacts on sensory functioning that come from things like taking medication, prescribed medication for regulating mood and for regulating their mental illness. So, for instance, we know that loads of kind of severe mental illness has a comorbid depression with it, and that medication for depression can sometimes leave a metallic taste in your mouth. Other medication impacts appetite. So we know that women who are heavily medicated state weight cycle. Their weight sort of oscillates, between sort of regain and loss, depending on how medication is calibrated for them and sort of what kind of medication they take. Also we know things like smoking, and that is more of a general point, but smoking, and that smoking is frequently used as a sort of, again, emotion regulator, but it impacts your taste buds, it impacts your sense of smell as well. It sort of it dulls it, it dampens it. And together, all of these complexities, and there's so much more. I mean, I could go on forever, but I know we are limited in time. Together, these complexities paint a picture that really definitely needs investigating. And so this is what we do. What we tend to do is we have a sort of a really innovative research method that involves eating. We bring a research chef, and it's an ambulatory method. We go on locations and we conduct something called food play, where instead of just asking people to talk about food and their experiences, we invoke them. It's very embodied, it's very visceral, and we sort of have a tasting menu that looks to kind of induce these real individual differences in the way food is experienced. And when that is experienced, the conversation that it elicits is just absolutely fantastic and very informative. And you learn all sorts of things about people's relationship with food, but also about life and how they cope with illness, etc. So this is what we do.
And what are you hoping to do? So with the research, then you'll carry out this the tasting chef, and then what happens next after you've done that?
Well, what we're hoping to do with the funding from Closing the Gap is to conduct the kind of the planning
Yeah.
stages. Because it's not very straightforward to sort of just turn up and
Mm.
do it. There are all sorts of things that that kind of the known knowns and unknown unknowns, and there's an awful lot of unknown unknowns. We can't quite anticipate some of the issues that might arise. So, for instance, we tend to whenever we go on location, our chef brings all sorts of sort of tools and things with him, but it could be trickier to do so in secure mental health.
Yeah.
Essentially, you can't be bringing all
Yeah.
sorts of implements with you, and that is out of question. And there's all sorts of, again, other things such as how to engage women in sitting down with us and stuff like that, and eating, because it's actually a
Yeah.
method where researchers and participants sit together and sort of taste and savor food.
Mm.
And sometimes that is very difficult for many people. There's an awful lot of eating disorder history and all sorts of, again, complexities that mean that sometimes people are not, they're reluctant to eat. And this is something that we kind of have to get around it. Sometimes sniffing food is just enough. Just
Yeah.
experiencing the sensory element, sort of the smell of food is sufficient. Sometimes just we know from from our experience with head and neck cancers, where one of the participants in this research was just she wouldn't participate in tasting and savoring, but she would sort of very happily be involved in the washing the dishes and
Mm.
kind of involving herself that way. And that was very it was extraordinary to kind of to see, and very informative.
Yeah, it just sounds fascinating. I'm really looking forward to hearing a bit more about your project when you've got further along with it, and telling and coming back and hopefully talking on the sofa again to give us
Yeah,
an update of what you found
yeah.
and what you've learned, and where you're hoping to go next. So thanks very much for coming and talking to
Thank
us.
you. Thank you ever so much. Thank you for having me.